While criminals get rich, a holy man said sorry. The Pope apologized for the Catholic Church role in slavery. 574 years after popes authorized the enslavement of Africans, the Vatican finally admits its complicity. So I'm asking, what does an apology mean when violent offenders and felons get reparations? I'm thinking this might be the first receipt in a long overdue accounting. Welcome to The Rite of Passage with Vanessa Riley, the podcast where storytelling meets passion and every page turns into a new adventure. I'm your host, Vanessa Riley, and together we'll dive deep into untold histories, reflect on current events through a historical lens, share behind-the-scenes writing insights, and explore the ups and downs of the author's journey. From rich historical novels to unforgettable characters to pop culture's intrusion on the written word, hey, we're going to explore it all. So grab your pen, your notebook, and let's begin our journey through the written word. Let's start your rite of passage. Sorry for slavery. Checks for criminals. To date, Pope Leo XIV used his first encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, Magnificent Humanity, to apologize for the Catholic Church's role in legitimizing slavery. I don't know if you all understand how big of a deal that is. According to the Associated Press, this is the first time a pope has publicly acknowledged and apologized for the role that past popes themselves played in giving European sovereigns authority to subjugate and enslave non-Christians. That is huge. But at the same time, it's still just words. So today I'm going to give you a little history and some math. In every book I write that involves the Caribbean, one of the most disconcerting things I find is that the Catholic Church was complicit in the moral sin of enslavement. I'm a woman of faith, or as Ellen, my daughter, says, non-denominational with Baptist leanings. My faith grounds me. It's my identity. It has sustained me in some of the darkest hours. But when I do research and I see enslaved people working in horrible conditions for priests, ministers, missionaries, and all the Catholic orders, I have to sit with that contradiction. Can you imagine spreading the good news of a Savior while returning to camp to beat and punish someone because the law said you were allowed to own them? Can you imagine preaching salvation while denying someone else's humanity? Today I ask, what matters more, the apology or the 574-year delay? In 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued Dum Deravas, authorizing the Portuguese crown to conquer, subjugate, and enslave non-Christians in Africa. The AP reports that this gave permission to reduce the persons to perpetual slavery. That was 574 years ago. 574 years is a long time to wait for someone to say, we were wrong. So yes, give some credit to Pope Leo. He's an American. He's from Chicago. His family tree includes both enslaved people and enslavers. Maybe all that matters. Maybe that's why he could step up and say wrong is wrong, even if his own hands were never on the master's whip. That means something. But it does not mean everything. Because apologies without repair are just public relations. So let's talk numbers. In 1838, the Maryland Providence of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, sold 272 enslaved people to two Louisiana planters for $115,000. That gives us a benchmark. $115,000 divided by 272 equals $422.79 per enslaved person in 1838 dollars. Historian Andrew Dial estimates that they held more than 20,000 people in bondage by the mid-18th century. So let's calculate from there. If 20,000 enslaved people were valued at the Georgetown benchmark, with simple multiplications, that's $8.46 million, but in 1838 dollars. We adjust for that today, that's $296 to $338 million. But Jesuits are just one order of the Catholic Church. If you add the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Capuchins, the missions, the universities, and the plantation systems throughout Brazil, Haiti, Cuba, Louisiana, and the French Caribbean, you can increase that number to 100,000 to 400,000 enslaved people. That value rises from the 296 million to as high as 5 billion in today's dollars. That is the math. Now let's widen the lens. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database estimates 12.5 million Africans were transported across the Atlantic slave trade. Using the same Georgetown benchmark of $422.79 per enslaved person, we get $5.285 billion in 1838 dollars. That is roughly, in today's dollars, $185 billion to $211 billion. And that is only the body price. It's not the labor, not the land, not the sugar, not the cotton, not the tobacco, not the banks, not the insurance, not the universities, not the inherited wealth, not compounded interest. Just the sale value of humans. Well, Vanessa, I'm not Catholic. I figured you remember that. Let's bring this home to the United States. Historians generally estimate that 388,000 Africans were directly imported into what became the United States. By 1860, the enslaved population had grown to nearly 4 million people through forced reproduction and hereditary slavery. Using the Georgetown benchmark of that $422.79 times the 4 million, we get $1.691 billion in 1838 dollars. Converted today, that's $59 billion to $68 billion. Now, if you divide that across 49 million Black Americans today, that would be about $1,200 to $1,388 per person. And some will say, see, that's not so much. Get over it. They would be right about the number because it is too small. It only values enslaved people as property. It does not include what was stolen from them and their descendants. It does not include 250 years of unpaid labor, the lost wages, stolen inheritance, land theft, banking and insurance profits, cotton, tobacco, and sugar profits, Jim Crow, poll taxes, redlining, burned Black business districts, medical experimentation, biased healthcare, or generational trauma that shows up in Black bodies today. Excuse me while I take my blood pressure medication. Les sigh. All of this moves the numbers from billions to trillions. Wage-based models alone calculate unpaid labor plus interest at $19.1 trillion. So now we're talking about $466,000 per descendant of U.S. chattel slavery. Congress is not about to cut anybody but a blood relative of the president or a convicted January 6th criminal a check for $466,000. It would be nice, but I'd not bet on fairness or wholeness at this present time. And speaking of blood pressure, the National Institutes of Health shows Black Americans are still affected by structural racism and intergenerational trauma, which leads to hypertension, heart disease, and higher rates of maternal and infant mortality. That sounds like payable damages to me. Any trial lawyers listening? All of this is to say that if the federal government can create a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund to compensate people who claim they were harmed by government power, then maybe we should ask, what do we call slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, poll taxes, eminent domain seizures, and violence directed at Black families, but being harmed by government power? The Justice Department will issue formal apologies and monetary relief to people who suffered improper government action from their criminal activities, but not to people harmed by the government's racially biased policies. Remember, slavery was encoded in laws, directed by government actions, in Black codes, Jim Crow, and redlining. Remember, poll taxes were legal. And today, eminent domain is still being used to strip Black families of land. If America has suddenly discovered that formal apologies and monetary relief are appropriate to repair harm done by the government, I have a list. It's not as long as 574 years, but it does begin with an apology. I thank Pope Leo. This is a start. It's not the end. Truth cracks open the door because good people ask forgiveness for their sins. And we need to figure out how to stop bad ones from getting paid for theirs. And if you're feeling generous, you can always subscribe. Very generous, considering becoming a paid subscriber. Extremely beneficial, buy one of my books or become a patron. Checks can be made payable to Vanessa Riley in care of Gallium Group Optronics, LLC. This week's list includes The 272, Rachel L. Sworn's book about a modern accounting of the Jesuit sale of 272 enslaved people that helped stabilize Georgetown University financially. Half Has Never Been Told by Edward E. Baptist. This book illustrates the economic arguments showing slavery as foundational to American capitalism. The Color of the Law, Richard Rothstein, shows how redlining and segregation were legally engineered by government policy. If you're mad enough to raise a sword, consider purchasing Fire, Sword, and Sea, my latest release. Or if you're in need of laughs and inclusivity and to see the good guys win, pre-order or review at NetGalley or request at your local library A Deal at Dawn. Step into a cliffhanger where the Duke of Torrance is dying to finally be a father to his daughter. But he must deal with the girl's mother, the woman who humbled him and broke his heart. Get these books from Resist bookstores. They still have a few signed copies of Fire, Sword, and Sea. You can also try one of my partners in the fight, bookstores large and small, who are in the trenches with me. You can find my notes on Substack or on my website, vanessariley.com, under the podcast link in the About tab. Hey, let's keep rising and creating together. I need you. Like, share, subscribe, and stay connected to Rite of Passage. Thank you for being here. I want you to come again. This is Vanessa Riley.